Well, let's go ahead and start. So go ahead and bring up Unity, and then create a new project. And you don't have to actually give it a meaningful name because we're not going to keep this. And then I'll create a project. I'm going too fast. I'm not even sure where everybody is.
Yeah, great.
You're creating? Okay. Today we're going to look at how to attach code to a game object, and then we're going to explore coding. So you got to learn a little bit about C sharp before you can actually start then putting it into your game. Okay, so we got our main screen here, and we can just drop our picture we have from the other day on, but you might have different computers, so you might not have that anymore. So let's go grab a. Okay. Oops, sorry. And Bugs Bunny's got to be safe, right? You try to pick something that looks like it has a transparent background to begin with. Obviously, the black here wouldn't be a transparent background. That looks like a good one. So I'm going to right click that, save image as, and I'm in pictures, and then I'll go ahead and click save. So find something with a transparent background. Not that it matters for what we're going to look at. Now, if you remember how to add a image, you right click down here in assets, and you can say import new asset. And I want to double click the one I just added on. And just so we can see it, I'll just drop it on the main screen there. Now, our eventual goal, which we should be ready for by next time, is to move this. Now, up here, you see I got the main camera, and then I got Bugs Bunny. If I click main camera, you can see what the camera is looking at. And there's the inspector here. See if I click the inspector here. Then you have different items you can set for the camera. The position is at 0, 0, negative 10. Now, it's curious. May change the X value for the position to 3. See how it shifts it over 3 units. So it's right here. Now, if I put negative 3, shifts it over that way.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
somebody put on the scene, like the picture.
Oh, it is?
It's not dragging on. That's weird.
Doesn't give you any kind of error message at all, does it?
And for some reason,
You're in 3D. You're trying to drop a 2D into 3D.
I am.
Yeah, because I see the.
Did I not think? Must not have this.
Go back in and choose a 2D environment. It doesn't know how to handle a two-dimensional. It'd probably do the same thing if you went in and chose 3D and you tried to drop a 2D on.
Yeah.
It'd say, well, what do you want me to do with this exactly? I'll wait a few minutes to. But it's probably creating a brand new project, right?
Yeah.
Just tell me when it's created.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Now, besides clicking these over here, you can also click these, and you can even drag and select that way. So I'm holding on my left mouse button, dragging, and like that. Okay, so we want the main camera. Now, the reason why I said that's weird earlier, look what Z is. -10. If I put in -30, disappears. If I put 0, no change at all. If you put this down there at Z is equal -10, even though we don't have 3 dimensions, is it possible for it to collide with anything? No. I'm just, I thought it was weird because of the way it still shows up here. Now we got our character you added on, whatever it is. So click it, and you should see information about it over here. You see there's order and layer. If you have multiple images on there, we talked about that yesterday, class before that, where you could have mountains in the background. This decides the rendering order. So which one's on top? Now this down here, then you see there's an add component. If I click the add component, this is where you can specify different things that will happen with your character. You may assign scripts that are already created here. You may choose mesh and choose some of these. You may choose physics. How do you handle it when you got a collider? Colliding is when you're hitting something else. Constant force, cloth. Does cloth follow a certain pattern? Yeah, if I take cloth and kind of like that, it's got a certain flow to it, right? So instead of you sitting there trying to program everything, they have built-in physics. You see there's rigid body and so forth. Like I said, we'll be looking at code here shortly. Next thing we'll be doing is programming our character move around with some kind of keys on your keyboard. And then next thing is colliders. With a 2D game, you have your character moving across. What stops it from going off the screen over here is the fact that the positioning. But that's kind of tedious to sit there and program. You check your position is less than this or greater than this. So you can put colliders on there. So it automatically detects collision, and then you can program it accordingly. Let's see. Is there anything else exciting here? It's probably all exciting under physics. Audio. You can set different things on audio. Some things do not make any sense for maybe a particular object, game object, but they make sense for other items. Event. These are all the different vents you can put in there. Layout. Network. These are some different things you can do with the network. But anyway, what we're looking at is new script. So come down here, you click new script. And now you want to give this some kind of name. Where we'll be heading eventually is like player movement. So you could say player movement. And you can press enter on that, or you can click this create and add button, either way. Now you see up here, we got a new item below sprite renderer and above sprite's default, and it says player movement script. But to get their code created. Now over here in our project window, we have our favorites, we have our assets, and under the assets, you see there's now a new item here. It's player MOV, and it says C, and that's pronounced sharp. Looks like C pound sign. That's C sharp. You don't have to do this, but if I had done add component, excuse me, new script, then you could have left it as whatever name. This is new behavior. If you right click on it, then you can bring up the code associated with that. Now, if I click it one time, it puts a code here so you can just preview what's going on. I think there's 3 different ways I've read that you can bring up the code. The way I always do it is if you have this, your character chose, you come over here to the new or to the player movement and see how there's a little wheel, whatever that is, there. You see what I mean right there? If you click that, you see how there's an edit script. You can also remove component. Remember I created this just to show it? I did it so I can show you. You come here, and you can remove component. And then that's gone. Now, if I click any of these other ones, most of them will have remove component. There could be some items on there that you cannot remove. That if you're going to have that item, you have to have it. But that's how you remove a component. Okay, I'm going to go to my player movement. So I'll click that, and I'll choose edit script. This brings up Visual Studio. And we'll talk about a little bit of Visual Studio, about coding, and so forth. Okay. Really?
Yeah.
Does yours say that too? Now we have different windows here. We have a toolbox here. This is our main coding window. Team Explorer I never use for this. We have properties down here, and these have tabs here. I can click Solution Explorer, and that'll bring up the Solution Explorer. And if you do the drop down under Solution Explorer, let me know if you can't find any of these. You see the new behavior script CS and the player movement CS. Now we deleted that component, didn't we? Did that delete the script though? No. So keep that in mind. If you've created a code, when you delete that component, you're just deleting that script attachment to the code. You're not deleting the code. The reason why they have this designed this way is so that you could then use that and attach it to something else. For example, if we were to go through and write all this code, maybe I don't want that particular game object anymore. So I delete it and I add a new game object. So I want to reassign that code and I don't want to retype it all. So that's by design. Okay, and you can pin these. You see how there's a, put your mouse over it, says auto hide. Looks like a push pin. If you don't want that to be taking up real estate on your screen, you can click that and it'll auto hide. This brings up properties. I can click it and auto hide. Over here, if I don't want toolbox, I can click that and auto hide. So you can have most of your screen showing if you want. Excuse me. Now, if you click at the tab again, it appears. You click over here and it'll auto hide. So if I go to Solution Explorer, if I want it to stay there, I click the push pin again. And that pins it to your screen. Now, if I come down here and I get this void start, and we're not going to do anything with that, but I just want to type something. Input. It pops up with this this menu of choices. That's called code completion. That's where it tries to anticipate what you're wanting to do and pops up with suggestions. Like this suggestion that I use input. Now, if I have this highlighted, and I don't think this will work, but we'll see. The documentation says if you do a control and then you do a single quote, it should pop up with the information off of for the documentation. Mine didn't pop up, so that isn't working on these machines for some reason. Someday we'll have all these bugs ironed out. But over here, if I go back to Unity, you can choose help, and you can choose a lot of different options. So there's a Unity manual and a scripting reference. And if I chose scripting reference, for example, how do you open this file? Let me see, Google Chrome. It'll bring up the Unity scripting reference. And now I can search for input. And this gives me all the information that starts with input. Here is how you check to see if any key or mouse button is currently held down. Input.anyKey. So if I click that, it'll come up. Public static bool any key. We're going to explain all of this, so you don't have to worry about that. It says, is any key or mouse button currently held down? Read only. using Unity Engine, using system collection, public class, example class, mono behavior, void update if input.anyKey, debug.log, a key or mouse click has been detected. So they give you code to demonstrate how to use it. Now this probably isn't too meaningful. Checking to see if they've pressed any key. When you play a game, you're programming certain keys on your keyboard, aren't you? What's a popular one for games?
BSD.
That, yeah. I'm also almost exclusively my PlayStation 3. I don't like to push buttons, I like the little controller. But if you want to check it, that's how you do it. As you scroll down over or to the left here, you'll see different items. And we're going to look at a lot of these this semester. Touch, texture 2D. If I click texture 2D, it says get a small texture with all black pixels. Get a small texture with all white pixels. Give you a lot of different methods here. If I scroll to the bottom, there's no code. Because with the texture 2D, there's no action happening. You have to actually choose one of these action items. Create external texture. Creates Unity texture out of externally created native texture object. Apply. Get pixel. Set pixel to. I was working with the mechatronics instructor at one point in time, and I wrote a program that go through a JPEG and get pixels. And I forget what in the world I returned off that pixel. I don't think it was color. I don't know what it was, to be honest. And I got to pixel. So you can go through an image and get it pixel by pixel. Now, the reason I did that is he had a laser that if I sent the image of the picture to him in a certain format, and I don't even remember the format now, it's been 10 years or so. But if I gave him that file, then he could burn it on his laser. So the idea was you grab a picture off the internet, like the Pink Panther, you download it, you get the pixel, and then if it's this, then you set that in your option file, and I saved the file, and then he could take that file and burn it on his laser. So worked pretty good, actually. I don't know if he ever got the laser part figured out. He never did show it to me, but I think he died shortly after that, so that also could have been a factor. Yeah, he passed away in I think in the middle of the semester. I'm not sure. Daniel Higdon took over for him. But sad. He was a nice guy. Okay, so if I looked at the set pixel, again, they'll give you a set of code, so it kind of guides you on what to do. So this documentation is really a good resource. A lot of documentation you see in programming languages do not explain how to use it. They'll just give you some cryptic definition of it and say generally what it's for. There's no examples. We're eventually going to get to the working tutorials off of Unity's website, and they emphasize this over and over of using this resource. Okay, then we'll go back to Visual Studio, and we talked about that. Like I say, you should be able to highlight this and do a control single quote, but it doesn't work for me. Could be I could right click on it and I don't see any documentation. Unfortunately, if you do F1, it doesn't go anywhere. If I highlighted that and did my F1. This goes to Visual Studio, so it doesn't go to where we want. Now I started typing here. See how this has got a red squiggly underneath? That means there's an error there. It doesn't like that. That's part of an IDE, is it guides you what to do. Now if I start typing input and I do dot, pops up with this. Now you notice this has got a wrench beside it. This has got a cube beside it. I guess wrenches and cubes is all that's really there. In some cases, it's actually code. In some cases, it's just like another element or a property. So you have to get used to those. So if I start typing get access, now if I do another dot, I can choose camera. Now if I do another dot, nothing comes up. So that's all that you can do there. Now, some cases you can do beginning parentheses, closing parentheses, and return something, or you can pass something in, and we'll see that. Now, once you get your code, and I deleted what I had messed up there. Once you get your code correct, then there's this attached to Unity. If I click that, now if I come over to Unity and I run this, although we haven't put anything in the code, we attached it to the game object. So anything from programming standpoint you've added in there, you can now use. Pretty good on that so far?
Yeah.
Now, you can add multiple scripts, so you're not limited on your scripts. Maybe you want to have one script that controls your movement. You have another script that has some kind of collider on it, where you're checking collision programmatically. Some of that's done automatically for you, but some of it you can do programmatically. Now over here, once you end a program, then it's no longer attached to Unity, and you can edit code again. Sometimes I forget that I'm over here and I got this running, and I try to change the code and it won't let me change it. Now I notice here, even though I'm running this, over here it looks like it still would allow me to add code. And that's strange. Because in my office, just during lunch, I was double checking everything I was going to show you today, and it wouldn't let me edit the code. So, gotta love computers sometimes. Okay, so we're going to exit out of Visual Studio, and we're going to exit out of Unity also. Are you good on how to attach a code? I didn't save it because we can do a lot more with it. Now we're going to go back into Visual Studio, so double click that. Just making sure we have a clean startup. Used to be Dark Ages. You'd write something on a mainframe. Write a COBOL program in a mainframe. It's nice. Somebody would write a Windows program or a DOS program using Paradox for DOS. That's nice. That's not nice. Horrible programming language. I think that was the only programming language I hated with a passion. So I could break every day. And then somebody else would write a a programming language in Pascal, um, real old programming language. All three of them would not talk together, and that was frustrating. The mainframe people wanted to bring their data down, um, and they wanted data to come in from the different sources, but they couldn't get it to come in. We actually had a batch machine running at IFR that would transfer the data. The Paradox for DOS had its own database, and we had files that we had a process that run every night, and it would copy the information over to where it should be. It'd break. We'd have to go and see what's going on with it. Not very efficient. So Microsoft came about, and they had the same problem. They had Visual Basic over here. They had their other development environments over here. Nothing talked. So they said, hey, okay, let's come up with a model such that everything will talk to each other. And that's the idea behind Visual Studio. It does not create a true exe. Like if I go to my File Explorer, and go to Download, if I right click on my File Explorer, go to Pictures, and now go to Download. I don't know why File Explorer hangs up sometimes. I have an exe here. Can I run that exe on Macintosh? On Macs? No. Can I run it on a Linux box? No. This was designed and written specifically for Windows. Probably even specifically for a Windows operating system. You ever try to install an old program on or a program on a new operating system, or vice versa? You try to put something that's meant for Windows 10 on XP or some old operating system. It's a nightmare. It's just literally a nightmare. It just doesn't work well at all. You sit there and struggle. To help you with that, Microsoft, if I right click on this, you see properties, see if I remember where it's at. Compatibility. Run this program in compatibility mode for Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7. They've tried to provide these add-ins such you can run it pretending you're Windows 95. Still doesn't work very good. You set those sometimes, and it's not Windows 95. It doesn't quite behave like Windows 95. So just a nightmare from Microsoft's own standpoint. Visual Studio was meant that you can create your program in C Sharp, in C, in C++, in Visual Basic. There's a COBOL that you can run on Visual Studio. Python. If you told me that about every major programming language is on Visual Studio, it would not surprise me. You have to install the appropriate add-ons and so forth. But then, if you write something in Python, you write something in Ruby, I write something in C Sharp, our own individual pieces will create a kind of like a pseudo file. It's not a true exe. And then the three of them can communicate with each other because they're not geared to a specific, platform. Have you ever seen you probably install stuff where it asks you to install the Visual Studio framework? I'm trying to think of the right word. A framework of some sort? Mostly like, let me show you. If I go to Control Panel. And probably looking right at it. Programs. Yeah, I was looking at it. It's yeah, right there. If I click this, start looking through here, you see how we have a bunch of Microsoft Visual C++ files. That's not unusual. I don't see it here. I'm looking right at it again. But anyway, they add in the components. It could be it's not separate in this version of Visual Studio. They add in the components such that it'll take that pseudo file and run it. So if I create that pseudo file in theory, then I could take that and I could run it on Linux, for example. So they try to make it such that not only will every language talk with each other, that you can write in two different languages, I can write another one, and then our system will be one. But also that you can then take it and put it on other platforms. Now it used to be worse than what it is. They've done a pretty good job with Visual Studio coming up with that new standard. Okay, blah blah blah. That's the idea behind Visual Studio. Now go ahead and do a File, New, and choose Project. When I installed this, I just installed everything. You see there's C Sharp, Visual Basic, C++, F Sharp. I didn't realize I installed SQL Server. There's even a game option here. Strange. I thought I installed more now. So I was expecting to see more options in that. But anyway, those are things that I installed. When I installed it, I think I marked 8 different items. And some of these were not included, like Visual Basic, C Sharp, C++, F Sharp are bundled into the language pack. So you might look at it as, well, there's 8 items there. Well, no, there's less than that. So anyway, you want to choose Visual C Sharp, and then you want to choose, we want the console app. Now here's what I was talking about. See how it says .NET Framework? That's the framework that's installed on your PC. If you were to create an EXE, for example, you could not just put that EXE on your flash drive and go to somebody else's computer and run it. EXE is an executable program, like Microsoft Excel, something like that. In order to run it, you'd have to have that .NET framework installed. Now, in a lot of cases, if you build a start install file, you don't have to worry about it. It bundles it in. If I looked up .NET Framework download, you can go here and you can download the .NET Framework. Such that if I give you an EXE, in theory, you can go over to that computer and then you can run it. It usually isn't as easy as what I just said. Usually it's easier to create an install bundle, where you install everything. Okay. So we want console app.NET Framework, and you can leave this saying console app too. Notice where it's stored at, source, and then REPOS. You could leave it there, but we're going to click Browse. And for now, we want to put it on our desktop. Yeah, no, it's not seeing desktop. This is top one here. Oh, quick access. Well, I'm lying to you then. Store it under your documents. So if I click documents and then click select folder, you see it now changes C: users, Kali, instructors, documents. And now click OK. Comes up and with items already here. I'm going to close the output window here, or maybe I'll make it smaller so we can see more. So this is our code we're working with. Now, if I go to File Explorer, and if you click Documents, then we called it Console App 1, since I didn't change the name of it. You should see a Console App 1 folder. If you double-click that, here's an SLN file. That's your main solution file. A lot of people that do programming projects will turn that in as their project, and that's not all. That is just like a point to everything. If I double click this Console App 1 here, this is where all your different code is for this project. Here's a XML file. I don't remember if I talked about XML in this class, did I? No. I did in the introduction to computer science class, though, didn't I? Yeah. I probably just mentioned it briefly. XML is a way to store off data. And so I could look at that file and see what's in it. Oh yeah, yeah. There's some on the oh yeah, take it right off there. Yeah, if your computer's getting ready to die, be sure to grab a charger. I put them on the back there, or you can unplug that computer. You're observant. Yeah, I had a bad incident last Thursday when my Mac died. I figured out how to fix it though, because you can you have to like connect the two together here if it died ungracefully. Somehow I'd lose connection between them. Okay, so I got bin, object, and properties. Now here's bin. Probably nothing there if I had to guess. Debug, nothing there. Reason why is you got to run your program first in order to create an exe. Now if I go back to Visual Studio, I'm right here. I don't got any code in here, but that's okay. We'll get to that. If I click Start, you go ahead and do that. It won't do anything exciting. It'll just probably pop up the screen, probably pop it right back out. Because again, I don't have any code. And then it came back. But if I come back over to here and I look at my debug folder, you see how we have console app1.exe? It just created that program. If I come over here and double click this exe, pretty exciting, wasn't it? It just came up so fast and then boom, back down because there's no code there. Now this is assuming that you have the .NET framework installed. If you don't have it installed, you can't do this. But in theory, and I have limited luck with this, in theory, you can take all three of these files, copy those to your flash drive, take them to another computer, and you can run it, and then see your program. Okay. Now going back to documents. If I go to this Unity project, last one I created would be this one probably. Yeah. Double click that. What do you notice out here? Yeah. And it says SLN, doesn't it? Do you see S.SLN?
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't see that, you can come up here and click View, and you can choose File Name Extensions. Now I can double click into these and see what's in them. Here's Assets. Go back to this is called a, what do they call it? Breadcrumbs? Bread trail? I think it's breadcrumbs. So we can go backwards. Click Library. I don't know what all that is. A lot though. Come back. Click Object. Debug. God, I haven't seen a DLL forever. Come back to here. Go into Packages. There's a JSON file. Project settings. A bunch of different files here. Okay. Now look where I'm at. I'm right here, aren't I? Go back one more. Go back to Documents. Why am I showing you all those files? I really didn't talk about them in detail. It really didn't have anything to do with what we're doing. A lot of people do not turn their projects in correct. So I'm trying to emphasize this. I'm back clear at the main folder, aren't I? At this point, once we get to the point where I'm going to have you turn in projects, you right-click on this, and you have to then send it to a compressed zip folder. So go ahead and create a compressed zip folder out of that Unity project. Now, when you do that, it takes all those files, and look at all of those. That's a lot for Unity, isn't it? And it gives it a default name. You can call it whatever you want, but simply press Enter to accept the name. Now, is that a pretty good size file? Yeah, pretty good size file. 6 megabyte for. We didn't hardly do anything. We dropped one picture on. This is what you got to turn in. If you turn this in, then on my side, I can open it up and I can run it. I can see your code. I can see everything. What people will do instead is they'll go into this project here and they'll right-click on this SLN file. And that won't give me anything. You get 0 points on your assignment for that. You have to right-click out at the main folder. Everybody good on what to submit assignment was? That's true not just in Visual Studio, but in a lot of places. Blender's a little bit different. Blender is one file, but later on we see that you can have multiple, and you have to actually bundle it up to bring it all in. Okay, back to this. From a programming standpoint, you want to keep things small. And I gave this example in this morning's class. I'll use it again because it's a fairly decent one. I won't go to Walmart. I tell you both go to Walmart. What are you going to grab as you leave the house? Keys and wallet? Yeah. Minimal amount of things, won't you? Could you rent a big U-Haul, load up everything in your house, and take it to Walmart with you? You could. That way, if you wanted to pull your couch out and sit on your couch in the Walmart parking lot, you could, couldn't you? Would that be very practical? No. Now, the same with a game. You're writing a game, there's limited amount of memory. I don't know. You guys probably have the newest PS4, Xbox One, Xbox 4, or PlayStation 4. Probably isn't an issue there. Might be. But it seems like to me I can only install so many games on my PlayStation 3. It's really frustrating. I couldn't even tell you how many it'll hold, but it doesn't hold very many. And it downloads a lot of files, doesn't it? How about PlayStation 4, Xbox One? Can you, like, is it almost unlimited or?
Well, Xbox One, you can get an Xbox One that already has a terabyte installed in it. Then if you want it, you can get an external hard drive, and it can have to what 8 gigabytes. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, so that's it's an issue, right? Where you have to buy an external in order to save off more games. On mine, I don't know if there is a way for a PlayStation 3 to have an external. Probably is. But I run out of space. So the idea is any program, keep it small. I could bring everything in, but you only want to bring in what you're going to use. And that's what these using are right up here. So these will bring in this link. This will bring in text, bring in tasks, and so forth. I can start typing using system dot. When that pops up like that, that's again code completion. And let's say I want to bring in something data-wise. So I could choose data dot, and I could bring in ODBC. So now this has brought in additional pieces of code that somebody else has written in order for me to talk via ODBC. There's a way to bring everything in, and I haven't done it for so long that I'm not sure. I think it's a dot asterisk. Let's see if that is the case. No. I don't know how you bring everything in. You wouldn't want to. That's why I don't know how. Because again, it's just like that example going to Walmart. You don't want to load up everything in your entire house to go to Walmart. You just want to take your keys, a minimal amount. Keeps it small. That allows you to install a program on a PlayStation or Xbox and not have it take up tons of space. It allows it to run fast. There's a Call of Duty that I've been playing lately that seems like when a lot of characters get on the screen at one time, it starts going really slow. Probably doesn't happen on Xbox One and PlayStation 4, but my PlayStation 3 is just like, oh, this is horrible, And part of the processing is done on the server, but part of it is also done on the local machine. By the way, you know what programming language they sometimes will use to write those sequences where you got so much interaction there, where you have 20 characters on the screen at one time? They'll write some programming or some game design houses will write that in assembly language. Assembly language, it seems like it's the worst thing in the world, but it's at very low level, so it can run very quick. You don't have that lag that comes from too many resources. In theory, that makes sense what the using is. Now, there's other things you can. I couldn't even on. Let me see. Using a plier. Using B, C, D, combiner, whatever a combiner is. Dot, or maybe that's it. No, that's something I can't bring in. I/O sometimes is an option. Input. I can't think of anything offhand. Graphics. Display. What would be a good? But that's how you can bring in additional pieces of code. Now, this down here, you don't really need to worry about this. This is basically giving it a name. This is another way of giving it a name, but this is a class. Example I gave in this morning's class was there's a video game of Star Wars Legos. Have you ever played that? You have? Oh, you like that? Yeah, it's got maybe 100 characters in it. I don't know. There's just like tons. Yeah, you can pick be about any character that was on the original Star Wars, and Luke and Han Solo. For the most part, they look different when you're running around, but do they move about the same? Yeah, really they do. They just kind of different images. How about R2D2? If you remember, it moves the same. Can it do something additional? It can fly, can it? So I don't remember if it can fly forever or if it's. I assume it's limited. Yeah. Um, a class. What that is let's say there's 100 characters in that game. Instead of you coming up with 100 different definitions of what each one of those does, since they kind of are the same, what we'll do is we'll create this object over here, a class. And then we'll create the different objects over here, and you'll inherit everything that you've got defined here. So if you come up with a new game and you decide, hey, I want every character to be able to do this. And instead of changing it in 100 places for all those bits of code, you change it in one place, and then everybody else gets to do the same thing. That's the idea of object oriented. And here we got a class, a program. Program is just what this name is here. Now, this static void, don't worry too much about that. Void. Void, there's nothing in it, is there? It's void of anything. Void means nothing's returned, which means after this gets done running, it'll exit out and not return anything. Remember how when we ran the exe and it didn't bring anything back? Well, that's the reason why. Main is this always has to be main. You can't change the name of that. If you do, I think it breaks it. It's been a while. I think you can pass parameters in. Like if I'm running a DOS program and I'm wanting to pass in parameters, I can do that. Now down here, you see there's a beginning brace and a closing brace. In programming, if you have a beginning, you have to have a closing brace. So they come in pairs. If you delete it by accident, if I try to run it now, it'll give me build errors. If I say no, see how it tells me, okay, you're expecting a closing brace. So that's the nice part about Visual Studio is it'll tell you an error here. It even tell you the line. It says line 17. If you double click this, it'll take you to where that line is. And you see those little red squiggly here. It indicates that, hey, something's missing. So I come here and I put a closing brace. And it automatically lines these up for you. That's fantastic. Okay. Now let's write our first program here. And we're going to introduce something called a variable. We talked a little bit about this before. Now, Unity has its own variables. You can think of them as variables. They're not exactly variables, but they're only own data structures we can use. And we'll talk about that. We can have for variables, you can have integers. Now, integers are numbers with no decimals. And we can have doubles. These are numbers with decimals. And we can have Boolean. This is a true-false. So Boolean is like a flag. And we can also have a string. These are our four main ones we're going to look at today. And a string is a mixture of letters and numbers. By the way, Unity went with C# because it's such a user-friendly language, and as a Visual Studio IDE, interactive development environment that you can work with. Okay, so let's say I want to see if I remember how to do a comment. I think it's // I want to figure out the sum of two numbers. So I want to figure out the sum of two numbers. What's 2 plus 3? What does that give you? 5. You took I said, what's 2 plus 3? And you took the 2, you put it into a brain cell, didn't you? You took the 3, you put it into a brain cell. Somehow your brain retrieved those, added them together, and then stored it back into another brain cell, right? And then you spoke. Well, we need to create a brain cell for the computer program, which is a variable. So I'll declare num1 and num2. Now, int has to be lowercase. That defines an integer. That says a number with no decimals. You notice I put num1 and comma num2. Commas separate your variable names. So if you want to declare two of them, like we declared 2 brain cells to keep track of those numbers, then that's how you do it. All of your lines end with semicolon. Well, most of your lines end with semicolon. You notice up here the static doesn't have a semicolon, does it? There's other places where you can't have it. Comments, you don't need it. Now we could hard code num1, num2, and let's do that to begin with. So num1 is equal to, what I asked you, 2 plus 3? So I'm going to say num1 is equal to 2, and I'll say num2 is equal to 3. Your brain had to, when I said what's 2 plus 3, had to add those together and then store it somewhere before you spoke, right? So what do you think I need to do? Num3, sum, whatever you want to call it. And you're exactly right. You can call that whatever you want. So I'll call it num3. Now down here, I'll say num3 is equal to num1 plus num2. Now, if you struggle with programming is always rough at first. It gets easier. The more you do it, the better you get. Okay, so this is assigning 2 into this variable. This is assigning 3 into this variable. And then this is coming here, and it always focuses on the right side. It's retrieving the value of num1, which is 2. It's retrieving the value of num2, which is 3. It's adding them together, and then it's storing it back out at num3. Now I want to write that out to the screen now. You told me 5. Your brain said, for your, I don't know how it works, but somehow it, through your vocal cords, it all worked together such you spoke. How you do that in this is not how you do it in Unity, but the console stuff I'm going to show you here is just very unique to what we're looking at. You do console right line num3. Now that's going to be annoying to you at first. When you start typing console and you do a dot and that window pops up, that's going to be annoying. There's sometimes I just get really annoyed with my computer at home. I'm doing something and things will pop up. You ever have that? And then it throws you because you were typing. you'll eventually learn to love those pop-up windows that come in here because it helps you with code completion. You don't have to remember that it's capital W, capital L, because it pops up. Like when I do that and I start typing W, you see how it says write line down there now? I simply do my tab and it goes ahead and does the code completion. It writes out the code for me. Now let's run this. Now that we got this. Is everybody to that point? Okay. So if we come up here, you might think click start, but don't do that. Under debug, there's this start without debugging. So go ahead and choose that. And if you look on the display here, what does it say? 5. So, well, that's not very handy, is it? It'd be better if it asked us what numbers we want to add. If I think about that, I'm just looking at him. And he's, okay, this is weird. Why is he just looking at me? If I want him to give me 2 numbers, what should I do besides just look at him? Ask. I say, okay, what's the first number? He gives me the first number. I store it off in my brain cell. And I say, okay, what's the second number? He gives me that second number. I store it in a different brain cell, right? Exact same principle that we use in real life is how you program it. So here, I'm down to the point here. I'm going to put this. We need to ask for the numbers. You don't have to do the comments there. I'm just trying to emphasize what do we need to do. So here I'm going to say num1 is equal to, and we're going to have to talk about this a little bit, but console.write line. I'm forgetting what I even said to do. I said I have to do a console write line and say input first number. Because that's what you told me I need to do. I need to ask you what the number is. Now to retrieve that number, we're going to do num1 is equal to. Now if I do a console.readline, like this right here, it'll give me an error. We haven't talked about the other variable types really, so it probably doesn't make as much sense. But when you do a console readline, it returns something called a string, which is a series of numbers. So you can leave that there. I'm just want to show you the pop-up. I don't think it pops up if I don't have it. If I have it there, if I start typing int, and if I do a dot, there's a parse. And now I can put in console.readline. And I forgot the beginning parentheses and closing parentheses after this. Notice a real red squiggly. That told me I screwed up. That was good. That's what a good IDE does, is it tells you when you have an error. Now I got num2 is equal to int.parse. Actually, I'm jumping ahead. Console.writeLine, I asked what's the first number. He told me it was a 2 or whatever. I took it, I stored it in my brain cell. So then what do I need to do? Ask him for the next one. So I do another console write line, and I say input second. Assuming I can spell second number. And now I can do a num2 is equal to int.parse console.readline. The int parse takes whatever they input and converts it to a number with no decimals. Console.readline gets whatever they enter in after they press enter. Now, we could spend an entire semester learning C#. We're not going to do that. I want to teach you enough basics such that when we get to the, putting the code in for handling movements and everything, you'll understand that portion. So as the semester goes on, I'll teach you more and more snippets of code and what they do and so forth. Did everybody get that? Now, if we run that, if we go to debug and you start without debugging, it pops up and it says, okay, input first number. So now instead of putting 2 and 3, I could put 3, and I could put 6. That's interesting. Do I still have it hard-coded? I still have it there. You can't have it reassign the values here. Let me delete those 2 lines. Okay. Now I got a white space here, don't I? It doesn't matter. You can have white space there. You can put it to make it more readable if you want. You don't have to have it. Doesn't hurt anything. Okay, so now if I do project, let's start without debugging. And 3 plus 6 should give us 9. So do 3 enter, 6 enter. Come back and tells us 9. Now, it might even be nice if we said that, hey, the answer is 9, right? So before I do this write line here, maybe I'll do a console.write line. And I'll say the answer is, and I'll put a colon there. And now if I run this, start without debugging. If I put in 3 again, 6 again, it tells me the answer is 9. In a video game, there is no console to bring back a message like that, is there? Well, some they design that way. You ever see some of those where they have a console at the bottom and they have system messages appearing there? I don't know why they do that, but if you have a score increase, score is oftentimes like up in the upper right hand corner, left hand, so forth, so you can see where you're currently at. Same thing from a programming standpoint. You do your calculation that calculates score, and then you're updating that value up there. So it's a little bit different. We're not doing a console write line, but we're still the same principle. We need to return it so you can see it in some way. You ever play a video game when it pops up with a display like that asking you to input a number? Is there?
Well, like coding, like a game where you have like hack, quote unquote, something. So you have to sit there and like guess what the code is and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, most of them, your input is strictly through like buttons you push, or through a joystick, right? So it's a little bit different on bringing in input. It's not strictly like text-based, so in some cases it can be. You could program like a tutorial where you try and teach people to add numbers together. You could have them input numbers. Typically, they push the button, and there's no like a console prompt. It's when they push a button, you're intercepting the keystroke that they just pushed, and then you're having a graphic appear like saying 1. So that's one way to do it. That's probably the most friendly way, so you can see that. Now let's save this. I think it should already be saved, but there's 2 little disks up here that say Save All. Now if I go back to my folder, and I'm going to go back to my documents, and I'm going to go to Console App 1, double-click it. Console App 1 again, double-click that. I'll go into Bin, double-click that. I go into Debug, double-click that. you should see console app1.exe. If you double click that now, it'll say input first number. So I can put 3 in here. Input second number, I'll put a 6 in there. And then press enter. Did you see the answer? No. It's probably so fast you didn't see it, right? There are ways around that here. That's the same as if you push the start button right here. If you click that, it'll pop up, say, I'll put 3 in, put 6 in, and immediately flies away so fast. That's why we have to choose debug, start without debugging, in order to test that. Now, in cases of our Unity, what we'll do is we'll make our code changes, and remember that button attached to Unity? You click that, and then you can go over to Unity, and you can do your test. Is there any questions on any of that? Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there. Believe it or not, we're out of time.